Well, I am A.B. Plexico. I was born in Sharon, South Carolina. I'm 86 years old. I came to Hawfields it constituted my third pastorate. 2 earlier pastorates in South Carolina, one with 3 small churches. That was my first pastorate. Second one was a moderately sized church with a nice membership. And then I came to Hawfields in 1972. Incidentally, your grandfather was on my pulpit committee and came to hear me preach, and consequently was a part of my coming here as pastor in February 1972.
Why did you come here? Was it the people? What was it about the people, the area? Just get into that.
That's an interesting question, Tolar. We had no idea of moving, and it's an emotional thing for me even at this point after all these years, because we were as happy as we could be at Iowa, South Carolina, pastoring the Good Hope Church. Had 180 members, every one of them active, every one of them loving and caring, and every one of them interested in the church family and being a part of it and building up the church. God just gave us everything any minister could ask for. And suddenly one Sunday I looked out and there sat strangers in the congregation. I had had many pulpit committees, but I didn't even, well, I talked to them. I was receptive, but nothing happened. But when I met with the Hawfields committee, God somehow told me, you've got to go to Hawfields. And I deliberated over the phone with your grandfather, Graham Smith, with Henderson Scott, with all the members of the pulpit committee, and we talked and conversed over the phone for a month. And the family didn't want to move, but I just felt like it was God's will, so I said, we'll go to Hawfields if God works it out, and we will stay 2 years, and I will bring you back to South Carolina. That's what we did. But that 2 years ended up in 25 years because we found here at Hawfield. This was in an interview with Robert Scott. Robert was interested in, one of his goals was to write a book on my ministry and his participation from childhood right on up in Hawfields Church. And he was partly doing this interview that I'm going to read an excerpt from for the historical aspect of it so far as the church was concerned, but also he was gleaning material for a book, and regrettably he was not unable, because of health reasons and consequently his death, he was not able to complete the book. But he and I sat down literally hours, and this is me speaking incidentally. I sensed a spirituality here that I sincerely appreciated. I felt like that in everything being done at Hawfields, there was, in the midst of all the activity that it took to accomplish the task, time taken by those responsible to pause for a moment and say, God, what is your will? Guide us by your Spirit. It was that sense of spirituality that I witnessed here that I thought was a little unique in a church, especially the size of Hawfields.
I just put a bulleted list of this, what happened in your ministry. So the membership reached the 500 member mark, and this led to hiring an associate minister, establishment of the Presbyterian homes, construction of a major facility for the child care program, establishment of the athletic field for the Civitans, hired an organist and a choir director, social gatherings for groups, meetings, because members didn't know each other,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Student aid fund, 3 other scholarship funds, publication of the cemetery directory, congregation adopted the unicameral plan, and renovation of the fellowship building in 1994.
Right. I don't remember those dates, but all of that is right. We had a significant spurt of growth in the late 70s and early 80s. Well, the community opened up. It was becoming a bedroom community. People were living here, sleeping here, going to work elsewhere, and going back to their home church, wherever it might be, to worship. And we really focused on that for a while. And God blessed us in our efforts, because we picked up many members in that process of witnessing to people and asking them to think about coming to Hawfields and to come and visit us. And Hawfields was a compassionate church. It was a church family that was closely knit together, but wide open to receive new members. And we really were blessed in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, in fact. You know, the church was filled, and we had Presbyterians in this community who joined us, and then many who weren't Presbyterians but felt like they had found a church home that they could be a part of, because we were receptive, we were loving, and as I said, we were compassionate, and people felt at home. We had a session. God blessed me with a session throughout my ministry here that was, number one, felt like when they were elected, they were called of God. I didn't have an elder that I don't think I ever had an elder at Hawfields that did not feel that he or she was called of God to that ministry and to that position in the church. And that was the bottom line that gave the foundation for what the session did. And so I was very much a part of every of the leadership behind that, and but it was not a responsibility, my responsibility to take care of the details. The session appointed building committees in each case, and they handled the details of getting it done. Back then, you know, a minister didn't have much time to do outside things like that, because it was expected that you would go to the hospital when people had surgery, you know. And after all, when people were in the hospital or there was a death, you had to go immediately. That was what I was trained to do in seminary, and that's the way I handled my ministry, because I felt like people needed the pastor there when traumatic things happened in their homes and in their families. So, and after all, I had 4 hospitals to go to, 2 in Greensboro, Duke and Chapel Hill and Alamance County. So I was pretty well tied up on pastoral duties 24/7. I've often said that Lynette was the one who raised the family, because I was not here very much. I was here in the evenings, late evenings, but it was a busy time, all 25 years, but I enjoyed every minute of it, and I praised to God every minute for giving me the opportunity to be a part of a church like Hawfields Presbyterian.
And you said that it didn't feel like you had elders. Is that why you got rid of the deacons?
That's an interesting story. We had deacons meeting and an elders meeting. Well, Tolar, you would have to know the history. Let me answer. Keep me there.
Okay. So October 25th, 1988 was the last meeting of Orange Presbytery.
We were called the Old Orange. That was the traditional name in this area. And it was a very proud presbytery because it was the largest presbytery in the denomination. Now we're talking about the Presbyterian Church, U.S. Back then we just called it quickly the Southern Church and the Northern Church, and you know now we are reunited after many, many years. Orange Presbytery disappeared in that reuniting of the northern branch and the southern branch of the Presbyterian Church, and that was with a lot of sadness for we who were in the Orange Presbytery, because when you're the largest presbytery in the General Assembly, they recognize the importance of that church body. The General Assembly does, you know. And so we were very much a part of the Senate and the General Assembly. We lost the honor of being the largest presbytery in the General Assembly. But Salem Presbytery has worked well during my years of membership in it, you know. And I, as a minister, a lot of people don't know this, I am not a member of Hawfields Church, and I cannot participate in the congregational meetings or vote or anything like that, because my membership as a minister is lodged in the presbytery. I'm a member of Salem Presbytery. Of course, my family is a member of Hawfields, the girls and Lynette. But that was a very easy transition, except for some of us who had been in Orange Presbytery for several years and had become accustomed to Orange Presbytery. And we had a great staff at Durham, and it was so easy to for them to get to Hawfields and Hawfields to get to them. We had a special relationship with the staff at Durham and in the old Orange that disappeared when we went into the new Salem Presbytery, because we were aligned with churches we didn't know for a while. But gradually that little situation was dissolved, overcome, and so far as I know, it has worked well.
Okay. I think that's all I need for the Orange. Can you tell us about the story? Towards your last years, where you broke your hip.
Oh, that was in last hip replacement was 87. That was in about 84, 85. The girls wanted to watch the Miss America pageant on a Saturday night, and the wind was blowing, and it had blown a wire hooked to our TV cable back and forth, and it had broken it, worn it out, broken it. And so I said late in the afternoon, I said, I'm going to run up there and fix that wire for them so they can see the program. And I did. I put the ladder up, but it wasn't high enough to go to the second story of the mast. So I put the ladder up on the porch. I did the most foolish thing I've ever done in my life. The back porch had a slight slope to it, and I put the ladder up there. Well, I went up and got the job done, came back down and stepped on the ladder to come down, and the ladder slipped at the bottom. And I fell from the top to the roof. And there was nobody there. Lynette and Ann were visiting down at Mrs. Ralph Scott's, Miss Hazeline's home. She had called them to come down for afternoon tea or something. And Susie and I were there alone. Susie was just a little tight. And I was lying there, I couldn't move. And I told her, I said, I had opened the window in the bedroom and you could step off the back porch into the bedroom through the window. And I called her and she came and I said, hon, I'm falling, and I said, I'm hurt. I said, you call Jim Covington at Tasty Freeze. I said, look in the phone book and find Tasty Freeze. Call Jim Covington and tell him that I have fallen and I'm in trouble. And she did. She went, wait, I could hear her. She got the phone and she said, Jim, Mr. Jim, she said, Daddy's fallen off a ladder and he's hurt and says, tell you he's in trouble. Jim didn't even respond. He just banged down the phone, and I don't think it was 3 minutes till I heard sirens coming. But anyhow, they got me off the roof, and it ended up in a repair situation. We hoped we could repair it, and it broke down after a year. I went to Duke Hospital then. They put in a partial hip. Didn't put in the cup that receives your hip bone. They just put in a bone in my leg. And that lasted for 2 years. And then it broke down on me. So I had to go back for a total hip replacement. And just by the grace of God, those things don't last over. The ones they put in back then didn't last over 10 to 15 years at the most. Mine's been in since 1987, and I have a little pain now, but not that much. And the doctor tells me when it gets so bad that I can't stand it to come, and they'll replace it, but they don't want to unless they have to. But now that's the mechanics of what happened, the procedures that I went through medically. But the real beauty of that was the fact that I lay in the manse down in the den in a hospital bed for a year. And Tolar, there was very few moments in a day from 9 or 10 o'clock till 4 that there wasn't a church member, at least one church member, and maybe a half a dozen. Mostly men, because the ladies all worked then, you know, they had jobs at AT&T and all of that. But we had a large group of retirees, and they came, they brought food, they just ministered in every way humanly possible. And we appreciated that, and it is a big part of our book of memories, what this congregation did for Lynette and me and our family during that time. They continued to give me my salary and helped us with the utilities. And it was just unbelievable. But anyhow, I came through that, and I always felt like that for the remainder of my years here that I owed this congregation a tremendous debt of gratitude and appreciation that I could never repay, but I could certainly show it by loving them and caring for them. And goodness knows they turned around and loved me back and cared for me and my family. So it was a unique situation. But I got up, and the first thing I did, I had a wedding. I married Mr. Cavendish, and I can't remember the lady's name to save my life. She lived up on 119. They had a food buggy, a food wagon. But anyhow, they were older people. both of them had lost their spouses, and I had a wedding on a Saturday afternoon for them. That was my first duty, and then after that I started preaching. The people would help me in the pulpit, and I would preach, you know. But that was a very loving and caring time that they shared, and I shared with them. Not that I know of.
Anything that you would like to tell?
I would just, let me just give you an illustration of how this church trusted me and really wanted to do what they felt like was in the will of God. We were having a little financial difficulty I came in 72, and the church finances had gone down. The church had been without a minister. It had an interim minister for a while, and you know, resources, contributions go down during that time. And we had a lot of things we needed to do in and around the church building itself, a lot of maintenance, new furnace, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I went to a seminar on financial funding in the church, and they talked about a program whereby you went to a neighboring church and had a meeting of the congregation in a neighboring church and talked stewardship. And that was what I proposed to the session. I worked it out with the finance committee, and the committee presented it to the session that we would have a church dinner paid for by the church, and then have it in a neutral location. And the Graham Church said they would be glad for us to use their fellowship facility for that. And I did that. The finance committee presented it to the session, and it was right amusing. The session wanted to, but they just couldn't see that we had the money to pay for the meal. And they said, let's just have a covered dish supper at Hawfields and not go to Graham. Said, people might not come. I said, I think they'll come. I said, the finance committee has backed it with a lot of prayer. And I said, I think they will come, but I can't say they will. And then I said, the program that we're proposing really needs to be held off of our campus. Well, they said, we hate to go against you, preacher, but said, we just can't see the way clear to spend that kind of money for a meal for the whole congregation. Said, we'll have a lot of people. I said, yeah, I know we will. It'll be a big cost. And so they voted that it would, not in an angry way, no anger expressed, but just regrets that we couldn't do it, but they did vote not to do it. And I asked the question, well, why do you really think we should not do this? And they said it's all based on money, having a meal that's going to cost several $100s, and we don't have it. And I said, all right. So I came home, and I was a little disappointed. And the next morning, the phone rang, and it was a member of the church. Wanted to know if I could come by his office at 11:30 that morning. That was at 9 o'clock when he called. And I said, yes, I can. So I went to his office in Burlington, and he said, I like that idea that your committee proposed last night. And he said, do you think if the meal is provided, paid for, that the church would, the session would adopt it? I said, I feel sure they would. And that member took me to Bacchushar's, and we sat down with him, and he laid out, they asked me what I'd like to have, and I said, well, what do you offer, sir? And he told me, and we picked out a menu. And to make a long story short, we had a call meeting of the session. Every elder was there, and every elder voted in favor of it. And George Basin Jr., you probably don't know George Basin, but your mom does. They were a very strong family in our church, the Basins, his father and mother. George Basin had a good financial sense about him, and he said he would serve as chair of that event. And we met at Graham Church, and whether we had, I would say we had 95% of the membership there. It flooded their fellowship building. We had to bring in more tables and chairs that night. Had a delicious meal, and our pledges more than covered the proposed budget. And we really thank God, and it's all God's doing. We never had any financial difficulties until during the rest of my ministry. We had an annual every member canvass, and we always got up our needed budget, covered it all right. But that was an interesting sidelight that took place one time, and it just shows us how God works through and in and through the church,
And that was towards the beginning of your ministry at Hawfields?
Yeah, that was in the, I came in 72, that was in the late 70s, early 80s, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I never claimed to be a pulpiteer, a good preacher. In fact, when I felt the call of God, it was after I'd done my Korean service. I had gone to work with Celanese Corporation of America. I was married, and we were thinking about having a child. And I felt called to the ministry after almost 2 years of civilian work, working with Celanese in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And the first thing was I went to my pastor and I talked to him, and he said, Avie said, we need to wait till the next year to begin your candidacy in the church. And I said, the session has to accept you as a candidate and recommend a Presbytery to the General Assembly. That's, back then it was done like that. And I said, Marion, his name was Marion Topham. I said, Marion, I don't want to wait. I said, I want to get on with this thing. I said, I'm getting old. And he said, well, we'll talk to Fred Hopkins, the executive secretary of the Presbytery, and said, you'll have to get his okay. So we went over and talked to him. Fred said, I think it would be better to wait too, but he said, if you want to go on, said, go down and visit the seminary and see if they will talk to you about coming in, if we can arrange it, get all the process done, And so I didn't know a thing about seminary, so on a Saturday, real early, Lynette and I got up at 4 o'clock and drove from Sharon, South Carolina to Decatur, Georgia. It's right outside Atlanta, you know, it was part of Atlanta really. But when we got to Columbia Seminary, it was as dead as a graveyard. There was nobody anywhere. We got out, doors were open, we walked in this humongous building, walking around, looked in the classrooms and everything, and all at once a door slammed. It didn't slam, but it opened up at the upper end of the hall, and I stuck my head out, and this little man was coming in, and he'd come back out into the hall for some reason. And I went up to him, I called him, I said, "Sir, I need to talk to you, please." And I went up, and I had never seen a picture of Dr. Richards, McDowell Richards, the president of the seminary. I had heard of him a lot, but I had never seen a picture of him. And something told me, that's Dr. Richards. I said, "Sir, would you by any chance be Dr. Richards, the president?" He said, "I am." Said, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, I've got a situation. I feel called of God to become a minister." And I said, "I want to come to Columbia." And I said, "My pastor and my executive secretary tell me that I need to wait a year, that it would be better for the process itself." And he said, "When God calls you, you need to respond." He said, "I've got a couple, a student and his wife coming in here for counseling in a few minutes, but said if you can wait 30 minutes, said they will be finished and I can talk to you." And in 30 minutes, I was in seminary. I had a house, I had a room. I was taking care of what they call the old Wade house. It was an overflow with 4 families. And I had one of the downstairs apartments, had another downstairs apartment, 2 apartments upstairs. I had to take care of all the maintenance and grass cutting, electrical work, everything. That got me my housing. Because I didn't have any money except my little bit from the Army, you know, that was very minimal. Oh, strike that for goodness sake. Very small. And so we had a prayer together, and I left and I came back and I told them, I said, "I'm in seminary if you all get it straightened out." So man, Presbytery got on the wagon, and they got me, my candidacy approved, and I went to seminary the next session. Ann was 4 weeks old when I went, and she and Lynette stayed at home until she was able to travel. And then my mother, Lynette's mother, brought them down. And that was our first, we were there 3 years at the seminary, and I got my degree. And I had preached in 3 little small churches in South Carolina on Highway 321. They were 4 miles apart. And I had done some student preaching there while I was in seminary, and they called me. But the seminary had a policy that you didn't, the church you did your student preaching in, you did not go back, you could not get a call from it. But these little churches, they were meeting together on Sunday morning, having their Sunday school, and then they were meeting together. And you know that the General Assembly had a special they gave me gave us in that situation, said since I was working to bring the churches together into one body, which they would like to see happen, that I could go. They would annul the requirement that you could not accept. So with their blessing, I accepted it, and I never did get the churches together because each one of them had a cemetery, and no church wants to leave its cemetery. But we did have joint services every Sunday morning, and rotated. Each church had its Sunday school, and we rotated around. We did that for 4 years, and it went well. But anyhow, that's how I ended up in seminary, and I got off key bad there. You're gonna have to edit that page. When I was 14 years old, we organized a scout troop in our little community of Sharon, and there were about 15 boys joined, and we didn't know anything about scouting. Our Scout-master was as willing as anybody ever was, but he'd never been a scout, never been associated with scout work. And we had 4 boys out of that group who got in it to really advance and to do well, and they all 4 did. But I and the 2 guys that I ran around with, we didn't have a lot of time for scouting. We went to scout camp up in the mountains, and we got badges, and I was thinking last night, it's tenderfoot and then Starr.
It's tenderfoot, then you have second class.
Second class.
And then you have first class, then Starr.
Then Starr.
And then live.
I had the first class.
Mm-hmm.
I got first class.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to work. Because, I had to make my own money.
Mm-hmm.
I went to work at the drugstore and at a service station. And I didn't have a lot of time for scouting. But I was a scout, and I always appreciated the scout program and what they did. And I congratulate you, Tolar, on the Eagle Scout. That is a real honor, and that will pay you dividends all through your life, I'm sure, because people appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Do you remember anything about Troop 52? Were they around when you were in your ministry? Did they have Boy
Troop
Scouts?
52? Oh yeah, yes.
They started in the 50s,
Ben Pollen and Virgil Dawes and all that crew. We were 52, and now are we still living in? Didn't Hebron take the 52 charter?
No, Hebron merged with us, so we meet in the fellowship hall for a combined Troop 52. It used to be 36.
Well, now shortly after I left, the scout troop left here.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I don't know what happened after that, because
I think it was rekindled when Matt Lawrence got involved.
I think you're right.
Okay.
So your first year of Cub Scouts was at Graham Methodist.
Well, see, when I retired, Presbytery didn't want us to live here. With the long-term ministry, they said that they just didn't want us in the community. We couldn't build here.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, is there any law against me not building that and building that? And they said, no, it's no law, but said, we feel like it's the best thing. I said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't care how you feel. I said, we've been at Hawfields for 25 years. I said, all of our family's dead, of course. And I said, our home is at Hawfields. And I said, we are going to stay there, whether you like it or not. It's all the pastoral relationship. Bachelor. 160, what was that?
There's your army. You were in the army too?
Well, it was called
No, you got a bunch of them.
Yeah, Lynette hung all these up.
Oh, where's doctorate degree?
Except for Lynette, she got that at the seminary.
Oh, yeah.
You what?
He can talk to you about it, but I read through.
He
He
and
might
I
want you to speak to that.
he and I were working on it, and we weren't really.
There you go.